A poor girl paid the bus fare for a millionaire with her last coins. What he did next surprised everyone. Before we begin the story, leave a comment and let us know which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. William Stone was driving through the city streets, lost in thought about the responsibilities of the next day. But in a moment of distraction, he turned onto a narrow, deserted street. Before he could get out of there, a group of robbers had already surrounded his vehicle, forcing him to step out with his hands raised. Minutes later, he was standing on the sidewalk. No car, no phone, no wallet. His heart was still pounding as he tried to collect his thoughts, but the reality was clear. He had no way to get home. Taking a deep breath, he started walking toward the main avenue. There were no taxis available, and without a phone, he couldn't call a private driver. His only option was to take the bus a few blocks away. Julia was waiting at the bus stop. It had been a long and exhausting day. Her shift at the diner had been one of the busiest of the week, and all she wanted now was to get home and rest. The bus arrived, and Julia quickly got on, counting her few remaining coins before handing them to the driver. She walked to the back and sat by the window, closing her eyes for a moment. But something caught her attention. "I already told you, sir. No money, no ride," the driver said impatiently to a man standing at the door. He looked nervous, his clothes disheveled, as if he had been through something difficult. "I was robbed. They took everything. My car, my wallet, my phone. I just need to get home," he said, trying to stay calm, but frustration was evident in his voice. The driver crossed his arms and shook his head. Every day someone comes up with that story. No money, no ride. William closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He had never been in a situation like this before. He was used to solving everything with a simple phone call or a credit card. But now, he had no way out. That's when Julia stood up. "I'll pay for his fare," she said. The bus went silent. William looked up, surprised. He hadn't expected anyone to step in, especially not a stranger. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he saw that she wasn't hesitant or expecting anything in return. She just wanted to help. "You don't have to do that," he murmured. "I already did. You better get on before he changes his mind," she replied simply, handing the money to the driver. With no other choice, William accepted and got on, finding a seat a few rows ahead. As the bus started moving again, he glanced back discreetly. Who was that girl? He was used to a world where almost everything came with hidden motives. But this stranger didn't know who he was. She wasn't trying to impress him or get something in return. She had simply helped because she wanted to, and no matter how hard he tried, William couldn't stop thinking about it. When the bus reached Julia's stop, she got up calmly and walked toward the door. William felt a sudden urge to thank her. "Hey," he called, making her turn around. She looked at him with mild curiosity, not expecting anything. "Thank you. You have no idea how much you helped me today," William said. Julia gave a small smile. Everyone needs a little help sometimes. And then, before he could say anything else, she stepped off the bus and disappeared into the night. William sat there, watching through the window as the bus doors slowly closed. He didn't even know her name, but one thing was certain. He wouldn't forget that girl anytime soon. The bus continued its route through the bright city, but William kept looking out the window. His mind was still caught up in what had happened. It was surreal. One of the wealthiest men in the city, had just been helped by a stranger who, judging by her simple appearance and diner uniform, probably had much less than he did. His fingers tapped lightly on his knee as his mind tried to process everything. His pride bothered him. He had never needed anyone to do anything for him. And now here he was, sitting on a bus with nothing but the clothes on his back and a favor he never expected to need. Julia, on the other hand, had already moved on. The gesture had meant nothing special, just a simple act of kindness. She had been through enough struggles to know that sometimes a small gesture could make all the difference. As the bus neared her stop, she pulled the signal cord and stood up with steady steps. She walked to the door, unaware that William was still watching her. As soon as she stepped off, he looked away, unsettled by how much that brief interaction had affected him. "Next stop, downtown," the driver announced. William let out a long sigh. When the bus reached its destination, he got off and walked through the familiar streets. His building was just a few blocks away, a tower of glass that sharply contrasted with the simplicity of public transportation. The walk to the entrance felt strange. He felt out of place. No car, no phone, nothing. The doorman raised his eyebrows as he saw him approach. "Mr. Stone, is everything all right?" William forced a small smile. "Just a bad day, James. Can you let me in?" The man nodded, still looking a bit puzzled, but didn't ask any questions. As soon as William stepped into his luxurious penthouse, he sank onto the couch and closed his eyes for a moment. Everything felt so distant now. His routine, his work, the superficial world he lived in. But what bothered him the most was that he couldn't stop thinking about that girl. The next day, Julia left home for another day of work. The small house she shared with her mother was in a simple but cozy neighborhood. Since her father had passed away, she had done everything she could to help with expenses, balancing her time between school and her job at the diner. She walked through the busy streets to the bus stop, just as she did every day. When she arrived, she leaned against the post and waited patiently, enjoying those few minutes of silence before another long day. Meanwhile, across the city, William woke up with only one thought in mind: finding that girl. It was an impulsive idea, but something inside him pushed him to do it. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe something deeper. But he knew he had to see her again. "James," he called as he passed through the lobby. The doorman, still surprised by how William had arrived the night before, looked at him with respect. "Yes, sir. I need you to find something for me. I want to know where there's a diner near that bus line that passes through downtown." James blinked in surprise. "Any specific one?" William hesitated for a moment. He didn't know her name, but he remembered her uniform. It must be one where the employees wear blue uniforms. The doorman nodded. "I'll find that information for you, sir." William thanked him and left, feeling like he was making a decision that might not make sense. But for some reason, he couldn't ignore it. A few hours later, the small bell of the diner rang as William stepped inside. The place was simple but inviting. The scent of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air. A few tables were occupied by regular customers, and employees moved quickly, serving orders. He walked up to the counter, glancing discreetly around, and then he saw her. Julia was behind the counter, arranging a tray with coffee cups. Her hair was tied in a ponytail, and her eyes held a focused glow as she worked. William found himself smiling without realizing it. He stepped a little closer, waiting for her to notice him. But Julia was so focused that it took her a moment to look up. When she did, she blinked in surprise. "You," she murmured. He tilted his head slightly, amused by her reaction. "Me? What are you doing here?" "I came to settle my debt," William said. Julia frowned, confused. "What debt?" "You paid for my bus fare yesterday. I think it's only fair to return the favor." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "It was nothing. You don't have to do that." He raised an eyebrow. "Then, at least let me buy you a coffee." Julia hesitated, but eventually shrugged. "If that's how you want to settle your debt, all right." She poured the coffee and set the cup in front of him. William calmly held the handle, watching her as he took the first sip. "Have you been working here long?" "2 years. And besides work, what do you do?" Julia looked at him a bit suspiciously. "Why do you want to know?" William gave a slight smile. "Because I'm curious." She considered for a moment before answering. "I study business administration at night. I want to open my own bakery someday." William raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's amazing." She shrugged. "It's just a dream for now, but I'm going to make it happen." He smiled, admiring her determination. "I believe in you." Julia chuckled softly. "How can you believe that? You just met me yesterday." He took another sip of coffee before answering. "Some people you just recognize right away." She frowned, not quite sure how to interpret that. But before she could respond, a coworker called her name, and she had to step away to assist another customer. William sat there, watching her from a distance. He couldn't quite explain why, but he liked being there. He liked the way she spoke, the way she handled everything so naturally. It was something new for him, something that for the first time in a long while felt real. The doorbell chimed again as William walked into the diner for the second time that week. The atmosphere was the same as his last visit. Freshly brewed coffee, warm bread straight from the oven, and the constant hum of customers coming and going. But to him, something felt different this time. Maybe it was Julia. He settled into one of the counter stools, watching her work. Unlike the first time, she seemed more aware of his presence. "You came back to pay off another debt?" Julia asked, pouring him a cup of coffee without him even having to ask. William smiled. "Maybe, but this time I'll pay for it myself." She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "Oh, that's good. I was starting to worry I'd have to help you out again." He chuckled softly. "I don't doubt it. But just so you know, today I came prepared." Julia just shook her head and went back to work. The place was busy, and William took the time to observe her from distance. There was something captivating about the way she moved behind the counter, quick, focused, always greeting customers with a subtle smile. But when the rush finally slowed and things calmed down, she leaned on the counter and looked at him curiously. "So, what do you do for a living?" she asked. He hesitated for a moment. The real answer could completely change the way she saw him. But instead of lying, he chose the simplest version of the truth. "I work in the hotel business." "Oh," Julia nodded, thoughtful. "So that's why you were so observant about the coffee last time." William smiled. "Maybe." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to figure something out. "And why did you choose that field?" He took a deep breath, running his finger along the edge of his cup before answering. "Because it was the easiest path." Julia frowned. "Easy? Running hotels doesn't sound simple." "Don't get me wrong," he gave a small smile. "But when you're born into a family that already has an empire, some decisions are made for you before you even get the chance to choose." She watched him closely, but didn't press further. It wasn't hard to see there was more to his answer than he was letting on. "And you?" William changed the subject. "Still thinking about that bakery?" Her eyes lit up immediately at the question. "Always. It's my biggest dream." "What's stopping you?" Julia let out a short laugh. "Money, time, circumstances, take your pick. You don't seem like someone who gives up easily." She smiled. "I'm not. But sometimes the road is longer than we'd like it to be." William nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. Before they could continue the conversation, one of Julia's co-workers rushed over. "Julia, can you take the order at table 3? She gave a quick nod and walked away, leaving William alone at the counter. He sat there, watching her interact with customers, chat with her co-workers, moving around with an ease that seemed so natural. For the first time in a long while, he felt at ease, like he'd found a place where he could simply exist without pressure, without pretense. And he liked that feeling. When he finished his coffee, he called over one of the staff members to pay. Before leaving, he left a generous tip and glanced at Julia one last time. She was still busy, but as he walked out the door, he felt her gaze follow him. He smiled to himself as he stepped outside. He would definitely be back. The following days fell into a familiar pattern. Every morning, William stopped by the diner at the same time, always ordering coffee. At first, Julia pretended not to notice, but it didn't take long for her to realize his presence had become part of the routine. He always struck up a conversation, and little by little, their exchanges became more natural. Julia grew accustomed to him, and without even realizing it, she started looking forward to seeing him walk through the door each morning. One day, as he waited for his coffee, William leaned on the counter and said, "Do you have a minute?" Julia gave him a wary look. "That depends. I want to show you something," William said. Julia hesitated, but curiosity got the better of her. "Okay." William pulled out his phone and opened a photo. He turned the screen toward her, revealing the elegant facade of a beachfront hotel. "This is one of my family's hotels," he said. She blinked in surprise. "You own that?" "Technically, I'm the heir to it, but yes, I help run it." Julia studied the photo for a moment. "Sounds incredible. And it has a cafe inside," William added with a laugh. "Now that makes it even more interesting." Julia handed the phone back and crossed her arms. "You must be used to places like that." William shrugged. "I grew up surrounded by that world, but lately I've realized that luxury isn't everything." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because sometimes the most valuable things are found in the simplest places," he said, his tone softer. Julia didn't know how to respond. There was something about the way he said it that felt different, deeper. Before she could say anything, the diner got busy again, and she had to get back to work. But that morning, for the first time, she felt that there was something about William she didn't fully understand. And for some reason, she wanted to find out. Later, when the diner closed, Julia stepped outside and walked toward the bus stop. It had been a long day, but something inside her felt different. She wasn't sure what it was. When she reached the stop, she leaned against the post and closed her eyes for a moment. Is it already closed? She opened her eyes quickly, surprised to see William standing there, leaning against a car that was clearly not the same one from the other night. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I thought I'd give you a ride home tonight," William said with a smile. Julia crossed her arms, skeptical. "Trying to pay off another debt. Maybe?" He laughed. "If I were, I think I would have shown my intentions by now." "True," Julia conceded with a small chuckle. "But I still haven't decided if I trust you." "And how do you plan to figure that out?" William asked. "I guess I'll need a few weeks of observation," she replied. "Weeks?" He feigned surprise. "That seems like a long time." "Trusting someone isn't something that happens overnight," William nodded slightly. "Fair enough." The car turned onto a quieter street, and Julia realized they were getting close to her house. That made her wonder about William. He always seemed so at ease, yet he never shared much about himself. "And you?" she asked, glancing at him. "Where do you live?" William hesitated for a brief moment, but kept his smile. "Downtown." "Wow, so probably one of those fancy buildings I see when I take the bus." Julia narrowed her eyes. "You like giving vague answers, don't you?" "I just like keeping a little mystery," he said. Julia chuckled softly. "Well, I hope it's not a dark secret." "Nothing dark," William assured her. "Just a little boring." She frowned. "Why do you think that?" William took a deep breath, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I think I spent too much time following a set script, doing what was expected of me." Julia didn't quite know what he meant, but she could tell he was being sincere. "Maybe it's time to change the script," she suggested. The car finally stopped in front of Julia's modest home. She unfastened her seatbelt and turned to him. "Thanks for the ride." "You're welcome," William said. She opened the door but paused before stepping out. "Will I see you tomorrow?" William raised an eyebrow. "At the diner?" He smiled. "Yes. See you tomorrow." Julia nodded and stepped out of the car, closing the door behind her. As she walked up the porch steps, she felt a small smile form on her lips. The next morning, William showed up at the diner, as usual. The doorbell jingled as he walked in, and Julia glanced over her shoulder, already expecting to see him. "You really are a man of your word," she said. William took a seat at the counter. "Always," he replied. "Today, I'm ready to try something different," Julia announced. "Am I venturing into the world of coffee choices?" William asked with a grin. Julia tilted her head, studying him for a moment before grabbing a mug and preparing something. "You seem like someone who needs something strong but not bitter." Was that a compliment or an insult? William inquired, taking the cup from her. "Just an observation," she said with a smile, but he took a sip, tasting the smooth yet bold flavor of the coffee. "Good," he acknowledged. "I know," she said, satisfied, and went back to work. Meanwhile, William looked around. He liked this place. He liked Julia's energy, the way she interacted with customers, and even the simple routine. It was so different from a world he was used to. However, as the days passed and he spent more time at the diner, Julia started noticing little things that made her curious. William never mentioned exactly where he worked. He only said he was in the hotel business, but never gave details. He also had refined habits, the way he held his cup, how he analyzed flavors, the way he talked about travel and places that weren't exactly accessible to just anyone. Julia started wondering who he really was. One afternoon, while wiping down the counter, she decided to ask, "You never told me the name of your hotel." William looked at her for a moment before answering. "I don't think it matters." "Is it a secret?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe," he said with a small smirk. Julia crossed her arms. "You really like keeping an air of mystery." "Let's just say I like avoiding certain judgments," he explained. "What kind of judgments?" Julia pressed. William let out a small sigh. "The kind that make people treat you differently once they find out who you are." Julia studied his response. Something about it felt off, but before she could press him further, a customer walked in, catching her attention. William watched as she went back to work, feeling a slight tightness in his chest. He knew that sooner or later, Julia would find out the truth, and he feared that when that happened, everything between them would change. That evening, Julia was on her way home when something caught her eye. As she walked down the sidewalk, she noticed a luxury car parked on a side street. William was getting out of it. He didn't see her. He was distracted, talking to a man in a suit who looked very serious. Julia stopped, watching from a distance. Something about that scene felt off. The William she knew took the bus and spoke in a simple way, always saying his life was boring. But this William was dressed impeccably, surrounded by an air of sophistication. Julia felt a knot in her stomach. Was he not who he said he was? Swallowing hard, she decided she had to find out the truth. For the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake in trusting him. Julia tried to ignore the uneasiness that had been growing inside her since she saw William on that street, stepping out of a luxury car. There was something about him that didn't completely match the image he tried to present. He spoke simply, seemed like an ordinary guy, but little details were starting to suggest otherwise. In the following days, she tried to act normally, but the doubt never left her mind. Who was William really? When he showed up at the diner the next morning as usual, Julia watched him more closely than ever. He was dressed casually, just like always, but there was a quiet confidence about him that didn't quite fit with someone living a simple life. "Good morning," he said, sitting at the counter. "Good morning," Julia replied, keeping her tone neutral as she prepared his coffee. "You seem more serious today," she observed. "Just thinking about a few things." "Good things," he shrugged. "Haven't decided yet," William said, tilting his head and studying her for a moment. "Can I help?" Julia hesitated before asking. "You told me you work in the hotel business, right?" "That's right," William confirmed. "And what's the name of the hotel where you work?" Julia inquired. William smiled, but this time it was a different kind of smile, as if he had been expecting that question. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity," she replied. He took a deep breath before answering. "Stone Hotels." Julia blinked a few times. She knew that name. It was one of the biggest hotel chains in the country. Luxurious, exclusive, expensive. A world far from her own. "You." She paused, trying to find the right words. "You work for Stone Hotels?" William nodded. "Yes." Julia studied him for a moment, letting that sink in. So that was it. He wasn't just an employee or someone working behind the scenes. He was one of the owners, William Stone. Now everything made sense. The way he spoke, the refined way he carried himself, the luxury car she had seen the other night. He had kept this from her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Julia asked. William let out a small sigh. "Because I wanted you to get to know me without my last name influencing anything." She bit her lower lip, feeling oddly unsettled. "This doesn't change who you are," she said finally. He looked up at her. "But for a lot of people, it does." Julia crossed her arms. "So you think I would have treated you differently if I knew?" He shrugged. "I don't know, but I didn't want to take that risk." She was silent for a moment, trying to process everything. "You were right," she said. "This does make me see you differently." William watched her carefully. "What do you mean?" Julia let out a soft sigh. "Now I understand why some things never made sense. You came here every day like this was the only place you had coffee, but someone like you could go to the best cafes in the city." William gave a small smile. "And who says this isn't one of the best places?" She blinked, surprised by his answer. "You really like it here?" "I do," he said. She wasn't sure how to respond. Before they could continue the conversation, one of the diner's employees called Julia over to help with an order. She nodded and stepped away, but her mind was elsewhere. Later that afternoon, when Julia left the diner, she found William leaning against his car, waiting for her. She stopped for a moment, crossing her arms. "Are you following me now?" He laughed. "Let's just say I wanted to make sure you'd accept another ride." Julia pretended to think it over. "That depends. Are you still going to keep hiding who you really are?" William smiled. "I promise to be completely honest from now on." She watched him for a few seconds before finally sighing and getting into the CARAS he drove. William glanced at her now and then. "Are you mad at me?" Julia let out a small laugh. "I don't know. I'm just trying to understand why someone like you wants to be treated like an ordinary guy. Keeping his eyes on the road, he answered, because sometimes being an ordinary guy feels more real. She studied him for a moment. So what is it that you really want? William was silent for a moment. I'm trying to figure that out. Julia didn't know how to respond. The rest of the drive was quiet but not uncomfortable. When they arrived at her house, Julia hesitated before stepping out of the car. Thanks for the ride. Anytime, William said. She nodded and closed the door. But before going inside, she glanced back and saw him still sitting there, watching her. That night, lying in bed, Julia realized that something inside her was starting to change, and somehow, William was part of it. The next day, Julia spent most of her time trying not to think about William. After finding out he was one of the owners of Stone Hotels, everything felt more complicated. Not because she cared about his fortune, but because it was unsettling that he had kept that from her for so long. That evening, when she got home, her mother noticed she was distracted. Is everything all right, sweetheart? Julia sighed, sitting at the table. I met someone. Her mother raised an eyebrow. And that's a bad thing? I don't know. He isn't exactly who I thought he was. Her mother smiled, amused. Did he lie to you? Not exactly. He just left out a few things. And now, I don't know if I can trust him. Julia's mother placed a cup of tea in front of her. Sweetheart, sometimes people hide parts of themselves because they're afraid of being judged. Maybe he was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. Julia bit her lower lip, thinking, maybe. But even so, something inside her still felt unsettled. The next morning, William showed up at the diner at his usual time. Julia had expected to see him, but this time something about him seemed different. There was a look in his eyes, almost like he was troubled. She poured his coffee and leaned on the counter. Is everything okay? He stirred his spoon in the cup before answering. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about me hiding who I am. Julia folded her arms, waiting. William took a deep breath. You were right. I shouldn't have kept that from you. She blinked, surprised by his honesty. It's not really about the money, William. It's just, it feels like you wanted to hide an important part of your life. He nodded. Because sometimes my life feels more like a cage than anything else. Julia frowned. What do you mean? He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. Since I was a kid, I was trained to take over the company. I never had a choice. Every decision was made for me. Even the people I spent time with were chosen by my family. Julia studied him carefully. And you never wanted that. I never wanted to be surrounded by people who only care about money, he said. Julia stayed quiet for a moment. Now everything was starting to make sense. Is that why you ended up here? William gave a small smile. I guess so. She let out a short laugh. And what did you find? He looked at her, holding his cup. Something real. Julia's eyes locked onto his. She hadn't expected that answer, but something inside her warmed at his words. Before she could respond, a customer called for her attention, and she had to step away. But that conversation stayed in her mind for the rest of the day. Later, when her shift ended, Julia walked outside and found William leaning against his car. She crossed her arms, pretending to be serious. This is becoming a habit, you know. He smiled. I thought you'd be used to it by now. And what if I said I want to go home alone today? Then I'd respect that, he said. She looked at him for a moment, then opened the car door. But I think I'll take the ride. He smiled and got in, starting the engine. This time the ride was more relaxed. The weight of uncertainty between them was gone. Do you want to take a little detour before heading home? William asked suddenly. Julia raised an eyebrow. Where to? It's a surprise, he said. She hesitated for a second, but then shrugged. All right. William drove for a few minutes until they reached a small park softly lit by old-fashioned street lamps. In the center, there was a gazebo and a lake surrounded by wooden benches. Julia looked around, captivated. I've never been here before. Not many people know about this place, William said as they got out of the car and walked to one of the benches. Julia sat down and looked at the lake, where the lights reflected on the water. Do you come here often? Sometimes when I need to think, he replied. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. And what are you thinking about now? He turned his face toward her. That this has been the best thing to happen to me in a long time. Julia's eyes sparkled for a moment before she looked back at the lake. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a different kind of silence, a silence full of meaning. When William dropped Julia off at home that night, something between them felt different. She stepped inside and closed the door but stayed there for a moment, leaning against the wood, feeling her heart beating too fast. Outside, William sat in his car, looking at her house through the rearview mirror. He knew he was falling in love, but he still wasn't sure if he was ready for it. And for the first time, he realized he might not have control over what he was feeling in the days that followed. Julia tried to ignore the fact that something inside her was changing. What had started as curiosity about William had turned into something stronger. But she didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to let herself feel something for someone who still seemed like a mystery in so many ways. William kept coming to the diner every morning. He was always there, sitting at the counter, waiting for his coffee. But this time, Julia watched him differently. Now that she knew who he really was, little details started to stand out. The refined gestures, the way he analyzed everything around him, the way he avoided certain questions about his life. She wanted to trust him, but a voice inside her told her there was still something she didn't know. That afternoon, while she was cleaning tables after lunch, she heard a murmur coming from the television mounted on the diner wall. Businessman William Stone was seen last night leaving an exclusive event at the Stone Hotel's family property. Sources say he is about to take over as the company's president, following in his father's footsteps. The plate in Julia's hand nearly slipped from her fingers. She turned toward the TV, feeling her stomach twist. On the screen, William was impeccably dressed in a tuxedo, surrounded by reporters and business executives. He looked completely different from a man she knew. The man who said he wanted to escape that world. The man who said he didn't want to follow the path his family had set for him. So it was all a lie, she murmured, feeling a heavy weight settle in her chest. Julia, a coworker, called out, but her voice sounded distant. Julia didn't answer. She simply grabbed her apron, untied it quickly, and walked out of the diner. She needed answers. The walk to the hotel felt longer than she expected. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the entrance, the security guards looked at her suspiciously. "Can I help you?" one of them asked. "I'm here to see William Stone," she said. The man frowned. "Mr. Stone is busy." "Then tell him Julia is here. He'll see me." The guard hesitated but picked up a radio and murmured something. A few seconds later, he got a response and nodded, allowing her to pass. Julia stepped into the hotel lobby, feeling out of place. The floors gleamed, the chandeliers were enormous, and the people around her seemed to belong to a completely different world. And then there he was, William, walking down the stairs, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He looked more serious, colder. The moment he saw her, his eyes widened slightly. "Julia, what are you doing here?" he asked. She crossed her arms, trying to contain her anger. "I should be asking you that. I saw you on TV, William. You were at an event last night, talking about taking over your family's company." He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a long sigh. "Julia, you lied to me." His eyes narrowed. "Il ne va lit." "Really? Then tell me, William, what were you doing here last night while telling me you didn't want this world?" He was silent for a few seconds. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," she said, pulling her hands away and stepping back. "You made me believe you wanted something different, that you wanted something real, and I do. But that's not what it looks like." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Julia, please listen to me." She pulled her hands away, stepping back again. "I trusted you, William, and now I see I was naive." He looked at her as if he could feel he was losing her. "Don't go. I don't belong in this world." "Do you think I do?" she asked, feeling the tears threaten to fall. "I don't know what to believe anymore." With that, she turned and walked out of the hotel. William stood in the middle of the lobby, feeling an emptiness grow inside him. He didn't know how to fix this, but he knew he couldn't lose her. That night, Julia sat on her porch, hugging her knees. Her mother came outside to check on her and sat down beside her. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. Julia sighed. "I thought he was different." Her mother gave a small smile. "Maybe he is, but people make mistakes." Julia frowned. "What if he was never honest with me?" Her mother looked at her kindly. "There's only one way to find out." Julia stayed quiet, staring up at the sky. But at that moment, she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the truth. Meanwhile, across the city, William was alone in his hotel office, staring out at the city through the window, feeling the weight on his shoulders. He had spent his whole life searching for something real, and now that he had found it, he was about to lose it. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. The clock was nearing midnight when Julia finally decided to go inside. The cool breeze brushed against her skin, and the quiet of the neighborhood felt even heavier than usual. Her mother had already gone to bed, but the weight of their conversation still echoed in her mind. She wanted to believe that William hadn't lied, that he had simply gotten lost between the life he had and the life he wanted. But how could she trust someone who seemed to live in two completely different worlds? Julia lay down on her bed, staring at the dark ceiling. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, the ache in her chest was real. She cared about him much more than she should, but caring wasn't enough. William didn't sleep that night, sitting in his office, his eyes fixed on the city lights. He felt like everything around him was falling apart. Julia had been the first person to see him beyond his last name, the first to treat him like an ordinary man. And now she saw him the way everyone else did. He had never cared what people thought of him, but caring about what Julia thought, that terrified him that he picked up his phone, typed out a message, but didn't have the courage to send it. What could he even say? He wanted to explain everything, to make her understand that he had never lied about his feelings. But how could he prove that? For the first time in his life, William felt completely lost in the days that followed. Julia and William lived completely separate lives. She buried herself in work, trying to ignore how much she missed him. He, on the other hand, threw himself into his family's business but couldn't focus. Each morning at the diner felt incomplete without William sitting at the counter, waiting for his coffee. Julia tried to pretend it didn't matter, that his absence meant nothing. But it did. She missed him, missed their conversations, their playful banter, the way he looked at her as if he saw something in her that no one else did. But she couldn't just forgive him. She couldn't let him back into her life without knowing for sure that he truly wanted to be there. William knew he had to do something. Waiting for Julia to forgive him wasn't enough. He had to show her he was willing to change, and there was only one way to do that. That night, William made a decision. He would leave Stone Hotels. It was the only way to prove to Julia and to himself that he wasn't trapped in the life his family had planned for him. The next day, he called a meeting with his father. "I want out of the company," he said. His father stared at him for a long moment before crossing his arms. "This is a joke, right?" "No, I'm serious," William insisted. The older man let out a low chuckle. "You think you could just walk away?" "I know I can," William said, his composure steady. His father's expression hardened. "All because of that girl." William took a deep breath. "This isn't about her. It's about me. You're about to throw away everything we've worked for." "It's not something I worked for. It's something that was forced on me," William countered. His father was silent for a moment before letting out a heavy sigh. "Do you even know what you're doing?" For the first time in my life, William nodded yes. Across the city, Julia was trying to move on. But everything became harder when she saw the newspaper headlines the next morning. "William Stone resigns from Stone Hotels, chooses a new path." Julia read the article at least 3 times, unable to believe it. Had he really left the company? Her heart pounded. Could this be a coincidence? Had he done it for her? Her stomach turned, and before she could think twice, she grabbed her phone and typed a message. "Julia, we need to talk." Seconds later, her phone vibrated with a reply. Asterisk William, tell me where and when. Asterisk Julia took a deep breath before responding. "Meet me at the cafe near the park." The cafe was nearly empty when Julia arrived. She sat at a table by the window, trying to steady her breathing. Minutes later, William walked in. He looked different, lighter, yet somehow more serious. He approached slowly and sat across from her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then Julia finally broke the silence. "You really left the company?" William nodded. "Yes." "Why?" she asked. "Because it wasn't what I wanted," he said, holding her gaze. "I want to build something on my own, something that truly means something to me." Julia studied him, searching for any sign of dishonesty. But all she saw was sincerity. "And what about me?" she asked softly. William leaned in slightly. "You've always meant something to me." Julia felt a shiver run through her. "I didn't know if I could trust you," she admitted. "Now?" William asked. She was silent for a moment before letting out a long sigh. "Now I want to try." A small smile appeared on William's lips. "I promise I won't let you down." Julia nodded. In that moment, she knew something had truly changed. They were no longer just two strangers who had met on a bus. They were starting something new, something real. The days after their meeting at the cafe were strangely calm. Julia and William kept in touch, but cautiously, as if they were stepping into unfamiliar territory. She wanted to believe he had changed, and honestly, everything pointed to that. William seemed lighter, more genuine. But there was still something inside her that kept her from fully embracing this new reality. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was just hard to accept that a man like him could truly choose a different path. One afternoon, while Julia was working at the diner, she saw a car pull up across the street. She recognized William before he even stepped out. He walked into the diner and took a seat at the counter, just like he used to. "I thought you had forgotten the way here," Julia teased as she poured him a coffee. William smiled. "Hard to forget when this is the best coffee in town." She chuckled softly, leaning on the counter. "So, what have you been up to?" "I'm working on a new project," he replied. "A new project?" Julia raised an eyebrow, curious. "Yes, I want to open a hotel, something completely different from anything I've done before. Something small, more personal, more welcoming," William explained. Julia studied him for a moment. "You spend your whole life working in luxury hotel chains, and now you want to open something smaller?" William nodded. "I want something that has real meaning, something that truly makes sense to me." "And where do you plan to open this hotel?" she asked. "In the coastal town my parents used to take me to when I was a kid," he answered with a smile. Julia blinked in surprise. "You never mentioned that place before." He smiled slightly. "Because it never felt important until now." Julia felt warmth spread through her chest. He was really changing. "And how do you plan to start?" she asked. William looked straight into her eyes. "I was wondering if you'd want to be part of it." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "You want to open your own bakery, right?" he said. She nodded slowly. "Dough." "Then why not do it inside my hotel?" he suggested. Julia was shocked. "You're serious?" "Completely," he confirmed. That night, Julia could barely sleep. William's offer echoed in her mind. It was everything she had always wanted, a real chance to have her own business. But it was also risky. What if it didn't work? What if this only brought them closer, just to tear them apart again? Still, a voice inside her whispered that maybe it was worth the risk. The next day, Julia met William at the same cafe where they had last talked. He was already sitting there, waiting for her. When she sat across from him, he looked at her expectantly. "Have you thought about my offer?" he asked. Julia took a deep breath before answering. "Yes." She bit her lip before smiling. "I accept." William's eyes lit up. "Are you sure?" "I am," she said. "But I want to do this my way." He smiled. "It's always been your way, Julia." She let out a soft laugh, feeling strangely light. "I guess we have a plan." "Yes, we do," William agreed. And in that moment, Julia knew she was about to step into something that would change her life forever, something she had never truly imagined happening. The days that followed were intense. Julia and William began planning every detail of the new hotel and the bakery that would open inside it. The coastal town they had chosen for the project was small, cozy, and surrounded by breathtaking scenery that carried a sense of new beginnings. Julia had never left the big city. The idea of leaving everything behind and taking a chance on something so new was terrifying yet exciting at the same time. William seemed different, lighter, more enthusiastic. For the first time, he was doing something on his own, without his family's influence guiding his every move. "This is going to work," he said one evening as they sat on the beach, going over the hotel plans. "You sound very confident," Julia remarked. "Because I am," William replied. "And you should be too." She sighed. "It's just this all feels too good to be true." William turned to her. "Why?" Because I never thought I'd get an opportunity like this. He took her hand. You deserve this opportunity. You've worked hard for it. Julia looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I just wanted to work out. It will, he assured her. And even if it's not perfect right away, we'll figure it out together. Julia nodded slowly, allowing herself to relax just a little more. After all, William had never given her a reason to doubt his word. The next morning, they went to visit the site where the hotel would be built. It was a large plot of land near the ocean where an old mansion once stood. This place has history, Julia said, taking in the aged structure. Yes, that's why I want to restore it instead of tearing it down and building something new, William explained. She smiled. That makes a lot of sense. William looked at her. Have you thought about a name for the bakery? Julia was silent for a moment before smiling. La Dolce Vita. He raised an eyebrow. Sweet life. Exactly, she said, because that's what I want. William smiled. Then that's it. Your dream has a name now. Her heart raced. For the first time, it felt real as the days passed. More and more details of the project were coming together. Julia split her time between working at the diner and attending meetings with William and the architects, overseeing the hotel's renovation. It was exhausting, but with each passing day, she felt like she was building something that truly mattered. More than that, she realized she was falling in love with William. Not just with the idea of being with him, but with the man he was becoming. Someone who was stepping out of his family's shadow to create something real, someone who was willing to change. One cold night, as they walked along the beach, William took Julia's hand and suddenly stopped. She looked at him, puzzled. What is it? She asked. He hesitated for a moment before answering. You know that this. He gestured between them. Isn't just about the hotel, right? Julia felt her heart race. What do you mean? I mean that this has always been about you, William said. She felt like she couldn't breathe. William, I know I'm terrible with words, but you need to know that you changed everything for me. I feel the same way. She replied. He smiled slightly. Then promise me something. What? She asked. Promise me that you won't run away when things get hard, he said, squeezing her hand. Julia felt a lump in her throat. I promise. And in that moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Days turned into weeks, and the construction of the hotel and bakery moved forward quickly. Julia had never felt so deeply involved in something before. Watching her dream take shape was surreal. She spent hours with the architects, helping choose every detail for the space where she would open her cafe. William, on the other hand, focused on the hotel renovations, making sure everything was going according to plan. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was in control of his own future. But as with everything in life, not everything would be easy. One morning, as Julia organized papers in the temporary office she was using, William walked in with a serious expression. We have a problem, he said, getting straight to the point. She frowned. What happened? The construction company sent a report saying the renovation will cost twice what we planned. William explained. Julia's eyes widened. What do you mean? William handed her the report. The building structure is older than we thought. They need to reinforce the foundation, and that's going to take more time and more money. Julia scanned the document, feeling her stomach turn. But we already had a set budget. Yes, but unexpected things happen, he said. She took a deep breath. What are we going to do? I still have some money saved, but if we cover this extra cost, we'll have to delay the opening, William said. Julia looked at him, uncertain. What if we make some cuts? He shook his head. I don't want to cut anything. We planned this place to be exactly how we imagined it. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to think. Then we'll delay it. William looked up at her. Are you sure? Yes. I'd rather wait a few more months and do it the right way than rush and compromise everything, she said. A small smile appeared on his lips. That's one of the things I admire most about you. She raised an eyebrow. My patience. Your determination to do things the right way, he said. Julia smiled softly. I guess I'm finally learning to trust the process. We're in this together, William said, taking her hand. She nodded. And at that moment, she realized that despite the challenges, there were no more doubts. They were building something worth waiting for. The delay in the opening brought challenges. Some people started doubting the project. Rumors spread through town that the hotel might never be completed. But Julia and William stood firm. They visited the site every day, overseeing every step of the renovation and making sure everything stayed on track. Little by little, the hotel began to take shape, as did the bakery. Julia started testing recipes, adjusting the menu to create something unique. "This is amazing," William said after taking a bite of a freshly baked cake. She smiled. "You say that about everything I make." "Because everything you make really is amazing," he replied. She laughed. "You're a good customer, and I'll be the best customer at your cafe." He looked at her warmly. "You know, I never imagined my life would take this direction." "Me neither," he said, taking her hand across the table. "But I'm glad it did." Julia's eyes sparkled. "So am I." And for a moment, she felt that every struggle had been worth it. But life always finds a way to test people. One day, while Julia was arranging the final details of the bakery's furniture, William got a phone call that left him visibly concerned. "What is it?" Julia asked when she saw him holding his phone. He took a deep breath before answering. "My father. He says he needs to talk to me. It's urgent." Julia felt a knot in her stomach. "And are you going?" William hesitated. "I need to know what he wants." She nodded slowly. "All right, but just be careful." He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm not going back." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I hope not." William kissed her forehead before leaving. But Julia couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation meant trouble. Hours later, William returned, his expression even more serious. "What happened?" Julia asked. He sighed and sat in the chair next to her. "My father wants me to go back to the company." Julia's stomach sank. "What did he say?" "He said I'm making a mistake investing in this hotel, that it's crazy to open something so small when I could be running something much bigger," William explained. Julia took his hand. "And what did you say?" William closed his eyes for a moment before looking at her. "That I'm not going back." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," he said. She smiled, relieved. "Then that's it." William nodded. "I chose this path, Julia." "He shows you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I believe in you." He pulled her into a tight embrace. And in that moment, they knew that nothing would make them give up. Days passed, and finally, the hotel and bakery were almost ready. Julia looked at the newly renovated building, feeling her heart race. She had done it. They had done it. The sun shone high in the sky, reflecting off the crystal-clear sea of the coastal town. A fresh breeze blew gently, carrying the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread from the bakery's kitchen. Julia looked at the finished building and felt her chest swell with emotion. "Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments," a voice said. "Type hot dog in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand." Now, let's get back to the story. After months of hard work, the hotel and the bakery were finally ready. Julia looked around the main entrance, admiring every detail she had helped design. The large windows let in plenty of natural light. The chairs and tables were arranged in a cozy way, and the sweet aroma of the pastry she had baked that morning filled the air with warmth. Across the street, William was talking to some of the hotel staff. He looked lighter, more complete than ever. The happiness on his face was impossible to miss. When he finished his conversation and walked over to Julia, she smiled. "Looks like we did it," she said. "We didn't just do it. We created something incredible," William replied, taking her hand. "I'm nervous," Julia admitted. "Why?" he asked. "What if it doesn't work?" "What if no one shows up?" she said. William squeezed her hand gently, as if to reassure her. "Trust me, it's going to be a success." Julia smiled, trying to absorb his confidence. She wanted to believe that everything would turn out well. The grand opening started at noon. The bakery doors opened to the public, and little by little, the first customers arrived. Julia stayed busy preparing orders in the kitchen while the servers brought coffee and pastries to the tables. The feeling of seeing people taste her recipes for the first time was indescribable. "This cake is divine," a customer exclaimed, taking a bite of lemon pie. "I've never had coffee this well made before," another commented. Each compliment warmed Julia's heart a little more. William moved through the hotel, talking to guests and making sure everything was running smoothly. When he passed by the bakery and found Julia, he smiled. "I told you it would be a success." She laughed. "Maybe you were right." He winked. "I'm always right." Julia rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. Hours later, as night fell and the last customers left, Julia and William sat at one of the outdoor tables, watching the ocean under the moonlight. "It was a good start," William said, crossing his arms. "It was amazing," Julia agreed, leaning back in her chair and taking a deep breath. "I can't believe this really happened." "Believe it," William said. "You worked hard for this." Julia smiled, feeling the weight of the past months finally lift. She looked at William, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to slow down. "I never really thank you," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Thank me for what?" "For believing in me," she replied. William placed his hand over hers on the table. "I always believed in you." Julia felt warmth spread through her chest. "I don't think I've ever been this happy." "Me neither," he said, watching her for a few seconds before responding. And for the first time, Julia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Julia woke up early and went to the bakery before opening time. She wanted to make sure everything was ready. As she arranged a few things on the counter, she heard the door open. She turned around and saw William standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Just a gift for the owner of the best bakery ever," William said. Julia laughed, taking the bouquet. "You're unbelievable. I'm pretty sure I exist," she said, taking a deep breath and looking at him. "Are you happy?" William stepped closer, gently cupping her face. "I've never been this happy." Julia felt her heart race. "Me neither." Then, without hesitating, William leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was soft, tender, as if sealing everything they had been through. And in that moment, Julia knew that after all the challenges, doubts, and changes, this was just the beginning of something even bigger, something that for the first time didn't need labels or guarantees. Because with William, she had finally found what she had been searching for. The bakery and the hotel were running better than Julia and William could have imagined. The first few days had been a success, and the coastal town was already seeing their businesses as a new gathering place for both locals and tourists. Julia was busier than ever, but every day of work felt worth it. Preparing pastries, talking to customers, and watching people enjoy her coffee was a kind of fulfillment she had never experienced before. William, on the other hand, was involved in every detail of the hotel. He made sure to check every room, follow up on guest feedback, and ensure that each visitor's experience was flawless. What had started as a shared dream had become a reality. But fate always has a way of testing happiness. That afternoon, while Julia was reorganizing the kitchen supplies, her phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but something inside her told her she should answer. "Hello," she said, a man's voice on the other end made her heart stop for a moment. "Julia, it's been a long time." She felt her fingers tighten around the phone. "What do you want, Eric?" On the other end, the man let out a low chuckle. "I just wanted to see how you're doing. I heard your bakery is doing well." Julia felt her stomach twist. The last person she wanted to hear from at that moment was Eric, her ex-boyfriend. He was part of a past she wanted to forget, a past full of empty promises and disappointments that had taught her not to trust so easily. "I don't know how you got my number, but please don't call me again," she said firmly. "Julia, wait. I just wanted to talk," he pleaded, but she had already hung up. Her heart was beating too fast. She didn't need this, not now. She took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. But even after a few minutes of ignoring it, the discomfort lingered. Later, when William walked into the bakery and found her distracted, he knew something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Julia hesitated for a moment before answering. "Nothing serious. Just an unwanted call." He frowned. "Did someone bother you?" She forced a smile. "It's nothing you need to worry about." William placed his hand over hers on the table. "If someone upset you, I want to know." Julia sighed, feeling like she couldn't hide it from him. "It was my ex." William was silent for a moment. "Does he want something?" "I don't know. And I don't want to find out," she said. He nodded. "Julia, you trust me, right?" She looked into his eyes. Of course I do. Then there's nothing to worry about, he said, forcing a small smile. But Julia knew William wouldn't let this go so easily. The next day, while Julia was busy at the bakery, William decided to do some digging on his. He didn't like the idea of someone from Julia's past coming back to disturb her. And when he finally found out who Eric was, his blood boiled. Eric wasn't just any ex-boyfriend. He was a man who had belittled Julia's dreams, who hadn't supported her when she needed it most. William wasn't going to let someone like that come back in her life. That night, as he waited for Julia to close the bakery, he decided to say what was on his mind. "I want you to promise me something," he said, crossing his arms. Julia looked at him, surprised. "What?" "That you won't let this man ruin what we've built," William said firmly. Julia looked away for a moment, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her apron. "He means nothing to me," she murmured, more to convince herself than William. But William could see the uncertainty in her eyes. He stepped closer, his presence warm and reassuring. "Then forget him," he said gently, lifting her chin so she met his gaze. "You have a future to build." Julia's heart fluttered at the sincerity in his voice. "Does that future include you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. William's breath hitched. "If you want it to," he replied, his thumb brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Before either could say more, the bell above the bakery door chimed, signaling another customer. Julia stepped back, the moment broken, and busied herself with filling a takeout order. William watched her, a quiet determination settling in his chest. He wouldn't let her past overshadow their present. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold, William stood outside Julia's home, a single red rose in his hand, a simple yet profound gesture. He had learned that with Julia, grand displays were unnecessary. Sincerity spoke louder. She answered the door, her eyes widening at the sight of the rose. "William," she breathed, her earlier worries momentarily forgotten. "I know things have been uncertain," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But standing here, all I can think is how lucky I am to have you in my life." Julia's fingers trembled as she accepted the rose. "I just never expected to find someone who understands me, really understands me." William took her hand, leading her to the porch swing. They sat together, the gentle creak of wood beneath them a soothing rhythm. "I've spent my whole life being someone else's version of me," he admitted. "But with you, I don't have to pretend." Julia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've always had to fight for everything. Love, security, my dreams. But with you, it feels like I can finally breathe." William turned to face her fully. "Then let's breathe together," he said, his thumb brushing her jawline. "No pretenses, no hidden agendas. Just us." In that moment, time seemed to pause. The worries, the doubts, the shadows of their pasts, all faded into the background. There was only the promise of what lay ahead, uncharted yet hopeful, as the first stars emerged in the deepening indigo sky. Julia made her decision. "I want to be with you, William, not just today or tomorrow, but always," she said, her voice steady with resolve. "And I will be with you," he vowed, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Through every sunrise and every storm, their lips met in a kiss that sealed their commitment. A promise not just of love, but of partnership. It was a new beginning, woven from the threads of their shared dreams and the strength of their bond. Over the coming weeks, life tested them with small trials, a delayed shipment of baking supplies, a challenging hotel inspection, but they faced each obstacle hand in hand. The bakery and hotel became not just a business venture, but a testament to their resilience and love. One evening, as they reviewed the final blueprints for the hotel's garden, Julia paused, her finger tracing a delicate outline. "We should add a small fountain here," she suggested. "The sound of water would be soothing for guests." William nodded, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned in to see. "I like it," he said. "It's the little details that make a place feel like home." Julia smiled, her heart full, just like how it's the little moments that make life worth living. As months turned into years, their businesses flourished. The coastal town became a beloved destination, with visitors drawn not just by the beauty of the sea, but by the warm hospitality and the genuine care poured into every aspect of the hotel and bakery. And through it all, William and Julia stood together, a testament to the idea that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with a single, ordinary act of kindness. Their journey had proven that love, built on trust and mutual respect, could weather any storm and bloom into something truly extraordinary.